Coming up, Brooke Lopez turns back the clock for the Bucks, and the Warriors struggle on the road again, this time in Memphis. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts joining us to go over the biggest stories on the hardwood. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Grizzlies built up an 18-point halftime lead against the Warriors. They almost lost it by the start of the fourth quarter, but then they pulled away to take care of the defending champs in the end. Locked On Grizzlies and Locked On Warriors are in to go over that roller coaster of a game.
Can you hear that? Do you hear it? It's a collective sigh of relief. Exhaling across Memphis and through the rest of Grizz Nation. A victory, a breath of fresh air, a drink of water for someone in the desert. Vindication and redemption for Dillon Brooks. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and Memphis picked up a much-needed win against the Golden State Warriors on Thursday night. If there was ever a team that needed a W, it was the Memphis Grizzlies. After the worst road trip in franchise history, a chance to come home, and while it was a little bit nerve-wracking at times with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, the Warriors at much closer to full strength than Memphis certainly is. Tyus Jones, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane did their job. Golden State continued to be one of the worst road teams in the entire NBA, and the Grizzlies maintained strong play at home. Big-time victory for the Grizzlies.
The Golden State road woes continue. And yes, I know I sound like a broken record. I'm Cyrus Satsas with your Locked On Warriors Locked On Now recap of the defending world champions losing their third straight road game, this time to the Memphis Grizzlies in a highly anticipated game given the war of words between Dillon Brooks and Draymond Green. Well, Dillon Brooks won this round. The Warriors again falling 131-110. And a key culprit is Steve Kerr gambling with a unique starting lineup that featured four shooting guards and forward Draymond Green and all of his 6'5" height. The result obviously was not what Kerr was looking for, and the Golden State Warriors own the third worst road record in the NBA. Hall of Famer Rick Barry is going to join me on the next episode to break down if the Warriors are still even world championship contenders. Because right now, with that road record, it's hard to say they are.
The Pacers were pushed to overtime by the Rockets of all teams, but Indy got it done during bonus time for the victory. Locked On Pacers says it was an ugly win, but a win is a win.
Pacers get it done despite not playing the best against the Houston Rockets on Thursday night. Tony East here, the host of Locked On Pacers, here to tell you about Tyrese Haliburton making it happen in overtime, because the Pacers started off strong, looked like they were going to run through the lowly Rockets, only for the Rockets to play better than the Pacers for the last 30 or so minutes of regulation, as the Pacers' 18-point lead slowly dwindled away up until the Rockets took a short lead in the fourth quarter. The game goes to overtime at 113. And it's key to note that entering overtime, Tyrese Haliburton had 17 points and 17 assists. And by the end of overtime, he had 29 points and 19 assists. He scored 12 points in overtime by himself. That's more than the Rockets scored as a team. They only scored 10. He also had 2 assists in the OT period. He single-handedly carried the Pacers to victory over the Rockets, outscored them single-handedly down the stretch. That's why he's an all-star. And Mathurin's injury, another story for the Pacers, all coming on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
Our Locked On Magic host says Orlando had the opportunities to beat the Jazz at home last night, but instead he tells us how the Magic let those chances slip away.
This is Philip Rossman-Reich from the Amway Center as the Orlando Magic fall to the Utah Jazz 131-124. And while a lot of people are going to focus on the big moments at the end of the game, the Walker Kessler putback that put the Jazz back up by 4 points, the decision to go with Paolo Banchero at center in the closing moments of the game, and these are all moments and things that we need to discuss and talk about and analyze and figure out what went wrong. But this game was really about the little moments that built up. The Magic played well enough to win. They even defended at times well enough to win, but it wasn't consistent enough. And there were were too many missed opportunities throughout the course of the game. 50-50 balls that didn't go their way that led directly to Utah points. Those maybe you can't do so much about. The team played hard. But there were missed free throws, 11 missed free throws, including several down the stretch that just were critical in a loss. This is a young Magic team that's still learning how to win and still learning to put all those pieces together. And that's really what this is about, putting all the pieces together. But it takes more than just the late game stuff to win games. It takes all the little moments throughout. And that's what the Magic are struggling to put together right now.
Coming up, Brook Lopez's big night leads to a Bucks win. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by FanDuel. We are past the midway point of the NBA season, so it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook app. Now, because new customers get that no-sweat first bet, you get up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes that are drained. Coming up tonight, the Heat are going to try to get some revenge against the Cavs. They are plus 110, so that might be a good bet for you. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you once again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Not many big names starting for the Nets, but things were closer than expected in Milwaukee. Locked On Bucks credits Brook Lopez for the win. Locked On Nets impressed with the effort from the bench.
Doug Norrie, Locked On Nets, coming at you after a loss by the Nets to the Milwaukee Bucks, 118-113. This looked like it was a game that was going to get way out of hand very, very early, with the Nets all but waving the white flag, sitting nearly all of their starters with injury or rest, and then the remaining starters only playing a few minutes. It was the bench that fought all the way through this game, keeping it close down to the wire. I believe scoring the most points ever for a bench unit in a game with 98. They still fall short in the closing moments to a Milwaukee team that was without Giannis, but they definitely gave them a scare. We're going to be breaking down the effort, what there was to learn from this scrappy group of Nets that actually took the court and put up everything they had in the game against Milwaukee. We'll talk about it all over on Locked On Nets.
The Milwaukee Bucks continue to pile on the wins, this time at home against the Brooklyn Nets. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. No Giannis in this game again. He was on the sidelines. He did have a wrap on that wrist that has been bothering him, but you sense that it is more of a management thing at this point of the season. The Bucks understood they were playing a shorthanded Brooklyn team, and they could probably get away with the win. It might have been closer than what we thought it would be, but it came down to an unbelievable performance from Brook Lopez, who continues an unbelievable season overall. He finished with 24 points, 10 rebounds, and a career-high 9 blocks in this game. It feels like it's a two-horse race between Brook Lopez and Jaren Jackson Jr. for the Defensive Player of the Year. Brook Lopez is 34. He had back surgery last year. He wasn't supposed to have this dominant of a season, and it begs the question, is he playing the best basketball of his lengthy NBA career? I think it's absolutely a chance. He has been outstanding. The Bucks now 2.5 games clear of the Boston Celtics at the top of the East. Catch us break it all down on Locked On Bucks, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube.
The Knicks did not kick off their West Coast road trip the way they had planned after they fall to the Kings. Locked On Knicks is in with us with more on that loss in Sacramento.
A comeback bid falls short for the New York Knicks as they open up their West Coast road trip, losing 122-117 to the Kings after trailing by over 20 points. Alex Wolf here from Locked On Knicks, and things were not pretty for the Knicks. They shot 13 of 50 from three, which was only 26%, and 20 of 31 from the free throw line for only 64.5%, which is not great. And the only reason they were really in this game was the huge rebounding discrepancy. They almost double up the Kings in that category, in large part thanks to 23 offensive rebounds, which they can thank guys like Josh Hart and Isaiah Hartenstein for. They also had a really good game from Jalen Brunson going in the first half. He was pretty much the only guy that had it going on for them. And unfortunately, he hurts his foot and is out for the second half of the game, and who knows going forward. So we'll have more on that and more on Locked On Knicks.
That will do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you subscribe to both Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.